And I'll tell you a little bit about the book, and then we'll talk to Poonam about it. But first, the launch itself. The book is called Scattered Rays, and as was announced, it will be available for signing later. But let us first launch the cover of the book. Now, most of us live in the course of our lives in 2 or 3 different places, possibly in 2 or 3 different countries. Poonam's book is about a life full of journeys because she's lived in 4 continents, in 7 or 8 countries, and it is really from that perspective that she's writing about herself, about India, and about each of the countries she has lived in. The 4 continents are Africa, Asia, North America, and Europe. But really, what makes the book and the poetry in it stand out is the perspective which is uniquely Indian about things changing in India, in the world, and also how India is changing along with the rest of the world, watching it change, and India watching the rest of the world change. As I said, the perspective is uniquely Indian, and it's really about herself. So Poonam will talk to us a little bit about some of the poems in the book, and she has a small PowerPoint to explain what she tried to do as she wrote these beautiful, beautiful poems. And I'll begin with the first and most elemental poem of them all, which appropriately is the first poem in the book, and it's about terracotta or the clay pot. So Poonam, should you like to begin with the clay pot?
Thank you, Raghavan, and thank you all so much for being here. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what poetry means to me. So as you can see, I'm going to talk about the human voice. And I think the human voice is the most powerful sound on this earth. It can start a war, and if you say, I love you, it can change a person's life. And the sound of a baby crying in the night, the sound of an old woman calling out to you, a scream behind a cottage or a juggi. What is it? It just shakes you sometimes. So the human voice is important, and this is what I realized. And I thought that we are so concerned with the world. I'm looking beyond myself to look at the streets, look at the land, but do we? This was just what I already said. It's the personal narrative in a world which is so noisy, which is so chaotic. It's important to hit the pause button and think about what really matters to us. Is it all that noise? Stay away, get away from that noise, go into that inner space and think what's going on. Next one, please. Okay, that's my diary when I was 14. And I discovered it in an old cupboard, and that's when I realized that even then I was writing poetry. I was trying to rhyme words, and somewhere it must have been inside me all these years, and it's come out in a more visible way. Can we move on, please? Okay, so that is the first one that I'm going to read about. That is a clay pot. And we don't have that much time. I'm going to read out the whole poem, but just excerpts from it. From the fields of a distant village blew a storm full of dust, pushed into shape by gusts of wind, blowing from north and south, breeze from the desert, breeze from the plains, from the fields and the distant villages, blowing in from foreign shores, across rivers and rivulets, across mountains and vales. When the mound formed, it was collected by a potter. In it was mixed the water from the Ganga. It also had drops from the Yamuna. The potter sat and toiled, turned it on its wheel, shaped it with his weather-beaten hands until the pot became smooth and shiny. The pot was dried, and then, when it became strong, it held water for the village folk, for those who came in from the fields. Got strength from this land and gave back by quenching thirsts. Strong and sturdy, brown as the earth, it gave back as much as it got. For me, that was the beginning, the roots, or the very element of life, the source of life. So, Raghavan.
You see, Poonam, this is not her first collection of poetry. She has an earlier one, Dancing on a Moonbeam. She's also a trained economist and a serious scholar of China. And a lot of your poems are about China in this collection, but she's also written two wonderful, very scholarly books about social and political change in China. But you talked about your roots, Poonam. Did you ever think as a 14-year-old that you would live in so many countries, over so many continents?
I'll tell you, Raghavan, I had this fascination for the world. You know, if I saw a foreigner, I would go and find out where they lived, even when I was a little girl. And so it was, I didn't realize at that time that I would be, you know, that it was something I wanted to do. But later on, it became my life. So.
Now you've lived and traveled a great deal in China, and you've seen China change, as indeed you've seen India change. And one of the poems in this collection is called the Chinese Renaissance. Now, why do you call it a Renaissance? Do you feel that the change is so elemental, so fundamental, so transformative?
See, China is changing. There's no doubt about that. But I feel that the Renaissance will be at a later stage, not how it's going on. I feel a lot of it is very superficial, and that's why I've written the next poem that I'm going to read out. And it's, as you said, it's a kind of a suppressed excitement about something which is taking place. But as yet, it's still struggling. The country is, I think it's still struggling to get to where it has to. And so next one, please. Okay, that was a picture of modern China, and this is one of the temples where I used to sit and have lunch with the monks very often, and I just had to write about it. It's already there, so I'm not going to recite it. But, so it's about faith and about looking at things in a way which makes you believe in them. This is a temple which has lilacs in the certain couple of weeks in March, and that is what it's known for, the Sea of Fragrant Snow. That's what it's called. And so this is where I got to know a lot about China, and I felt that it was very apt to write a poem about that. But now I will go on to the Chinese Renaissance. Okay, look in the horizon, the dawning of a new age. Here, the ginkgo trees, tall, touching the skies, have wrapped around them the creepers of small green yuan. As you know, yuan is the currency, showing a bright green color, which doesn't really grow. It doesn't absorb water from the soil. It doesn't really suck the gist of the land. It captures the dew spread from the red flags around it, wraps it in paper wings, moistens the material and wrings it dry from time to time, disintegrating into nothingness, into pulp and dust, drifting down to the land which supported it. When true green becomes succulent, lives, shrivels, dies, and falls to the ground, and new leaves sprout as green as young life, that will be the Chinese Renaissance. I don't know if you have understood the meaning of this. Is it clear or not? Has anyone understood?
I think what you're trying to say is that this is the Renaissance which is yet to come.
Yes, this is not it. This is a very sort of superficial way of, money is important, but the green yuan don't really absorb from the soil. It's just one of those artificially created things. So the Renaissance still has to come.
And how much of this conclusion was informed by your scholarly study of China, and how much of it by your intuitive looking into the soul of China as a poet?
I think it was just living there and talking to people. I have a lot of Chinese friends, and I spoke to a lot of people, young people, older people, students, and this was all intuitive. This is what I think. And the scholarly work is something different. That also adds to it. But most of it was because I was there, and I still go back a lot. So this is my, interpretation.
Well, the poem I found the most powerful in this collection is something called the Yangtze and the Yamuna, which really is, brings you at the heart of how China and India interface, or how you saw two ancient civilizations interface. So what did you feel about living in China as an Indian?
See, Raghavan, can we have the next slide, please? They're going to, I don't know if they're listening. The next one, please.
The next one.
Okay. So, look, they're very different, the Yangtze and the Yamuna. You go down a cruise on the Yangtze and you realize how it's very, it's where the cradle of civilization was really for the Chinese. And the Yamuna is so much a part of our it's our heritage, it's our geography, but they're so different. But at the same time, there is the sacred geographies, as I like to call it. Because somewhere everything was connected, wasn't it? It wasn't that there were boundaries or anything. When you have movement of people up and down, when you have geographies, it's all connected. So on the one hand, they are different, yes, but on the other hand, what do they tell us? About humanity, about how the geographies were connected. So I'm just going to read out a little bit. Yangtze, Yangtze, heart of the Chinese civilization. Yamuna, rubbing against the skin of Delhi, flowing down Delhi, Vrindavan, Mathura, absorbing the legends of the times, flowing in spite of the human sludge, through fertile lands, hydrating the soil. Little seedlings, nurturing thousands of trees, giving life to countless birds that move their wings in colorful motion. The seat of the Markandeya Purana, playing its way around gorges. The Yangtze, rocking us gently, speaking within the hills, born in the Qinghai, moving across the plains, Sichuan, Yunnan, Tibet, Hubei, Hunan, Jiangxi, Anhui, Jiangsu, Shanghai, pouring its heart out into Shanghai. A Buddha, a Confucius, and a Lao Tzu in their wisdom together, praying from one incense burner. The monks of the land merge their prayers. The Yangtze rises and abates, perfectly absorbing the pulls and pushes, the highs and lows of the land. Meanwhile, in the homeland Bharat, far upon the horizon, scattered like gold coins on a kikar tree, sparkling with sunshine on a dry, beaten land, is the beauty of the cracked earth. Sacred geographies, Karam yogis, bhikharis, sons of the soil, their sweat merging with the lay of the land, crying, laughing, spitting on the mud, drops of blood from stealthily conducted crimes, dancing feet making patterns in the ground. The droppings of birds, the carcasses of animals, all make this land what it is. The melee of laughter, of tears and joy, the land of abundance, yet the land of dire scarcity. This land lives in the hand of Vishnu. It flourishes in the lap of Durga. It shines in the fragrance of the chameli, and when it wilts, the rain falls upon the earth to sprout new leaves, new seeds, and new tomorrows. If you can see the contrast between how the yuan absorbs soil, it doesn't absorb water from the soil, but here the trees do. So that was...
So you feel that there is an emerging contrast between these two ancient civilizations?
I do, yes, I do. But eventually, in which direction we all go, that is something we'll see.
Because in India too, there is a great deal of materialism and a movement away from
You're right.
write about.
Yeah.
So in that sense, the two could be coming together, even if it's in a negative way in terms of discarding.
Yes, to a certain extent, yes, because we're all moving ahead, and we're all trying to find our ways forward.
Well, some of the poems are about another country in which Poonam lived, which is again very close to both China and Bhutan, in many ways situated at the interface between the Indic and the Sinic cultures, and that is Bhutan. And she has a beautiful poem about the Thimphu Chu, or a river in Bhutan. And to my mind, at least when I read it, I thought these were very much reflections of an Indian living in Bhutan and wondering what it is like to be between these two large ancient civilizations, China and India.
Yes, I think Bhutan was, I always like to think of it as a very benevolent country. The people are extremely kind, they're very nice, and it was like being at home, and yet it was different. And so please, can we have the next slide? Okay, it's about the Thimphu Chu. Dreaming along the Himalayas, flowing between two beautiful shores, you lie, Thimphu Chu, hiding in your bosom the beauty of the mountains, the dreams we dreamt sitting on your friendly bank, the chatter, the banter among families, the sounds of a distant zong, that is the zong, the smells of yaks and mountain goats. From your bosom, steep tracks emerge to reach obscure monasteries, glowing with butter lamps and brass statues, prayer flags dispersing positive vibrations, scattering them into the clouds. The soft ripples caress the land and leave memories of gentle compassion and wise hands, holding humanity in its palms. Thimphu Chu.
Well, Bhutan, as you know, is between China and India, and these reflections are about how an Indian looks at Bhutan and how Bhutan looks at India. But Poonam has also lived, again, in another continent, far removed from India, China, and Bhutan, and that is in Africa. Now, what was it like living in Africa for an Indian? You stayed there for many years?
Yeah, 3 years. Well, I went with great apprehension because I had never really dealt with the African people before. But when I went there, I just realized it's a beautiful country, it's a beautiful continent, and it's God's own continent. It's completely different from anything that we've seen. The people are different, the land, the sceneries, everything is so different, but at the same time, you know, there are a lot of Indians over there as well. So there were lots of Gujaratis who had settled there many, generations ago. And in a way, it felt like home, but in a way, it was completely different. And as you know, wherever you go, you make a home for yourself. So home and yet not home, moving on, that's what, the whole thing is about. So this was, can we have Gorongoro? And the next one, please. Yeah, that is Gorongoro. That's a game park. So you can't talk about Tanzania without talking about the animals and the game park. You see zebras walking along the roads. So it's completely unique. Forgotten dream. There once was a land open and wide. How much time? Okay. A land where the wildebeest run, where pelicans and ostriches left their imprints, where rhinos and hippos left a deep mark. And now this land is Gorongoro. Man and beast wandering in the same blaze, the wide open spaces of our beautiful earth. Gorongoro, landmass, Gondwana land, the favored land, the continent of the gods. Standing at the top of the crater, looking at a land so vast, a land without borders, wide open expanse of golden heats, the earth, the universe, the wide expanse of the galaxy, that is Gorongoro.
Well, as I said, most of us moved 3 or 4 times in the course of our lives. Poonam has moved many times. And it's a very, very difficult process, which is what is so striking about this collection of poems, because you lay down roots and then you tear them up and move on and go to a different environment altogether. But part of this process is also understanding yourself and understanding India. And many of these poems come back to India. And really that is what gives the reflections about the other countries she writes about so much maturity, and what gives so much clarity about what she's trying to say about India. So the next poem which I particularly liked was about Indian women, if I'm not mistaken, the women of our land.
So Raghavan, for me, there's certain issues very close to my heart. And one of them is women, as you can imagine. And, somewhere I understand what women go through and the struggle that, women are. It's an ongoing struggle. It's also a wonderful thing that we've moved far ahead of what used to be. And also the other issues that I've written about, basically, there's a poem called Ram Lal and Ramallah. It's about Hindus and Muslims and how actually we're all very, very similar at heart. We all cry for our dear ones. There is one about a stalker. That is something, which we see happening around us so often. There is one about what we call an untouchable, a little child. Anyway, I'm not going to be able to read many of these things, but yes, the women I will. So it's called The Women of Our Land. Can we have the next one, please? The women of our land, holding lively, pretty, holding a child by the hand, pride flashing in their eyes, coal-lined eyes, bright and beautiful, tearful and happy, joyous and sad, tending chulas, rotis and dhotis, minding the children, stirring the pot. Now and then get up to cheer the hero of their favorite TV serial, a moist eye hidden from the family, a longing look, a hidden sob, turning to the gruel again and dropping their lashes, forcing back the tears, run after the children, their dreams and smiles, merging into everyday chores. The daughter, sister, bride holds her family together, ties it around the sari she wears, tucked in to make it hold fast, and in her pleats weaves the dreams of her life, living her dreams through her family. She lives her dreams one meal at a time, one day, 1 week, 1 year at a time. Each day spans her universe, her sobbing, her laughing, her joy. And in the gruel she cooks every day are the tears that tie her to the land.
Is this a pessimistic poem?
No, it's reality. There are dreams, they're fulfilling their dreams, but yet you are connected to your family. And yes, it's a very complicated country. There may be some women who have dreams and can't fulfill them. There are some who do, so it's about life.
Do you feel, between the time you started your travels and now that you're back in India, women have made more progress than you thought they would?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see all the young people around and, there is no doubt that we moved forward. But there are people who are still behind and who will move forward in their own way. Everyone doesn't have to move forward in one particular way. They have their own. But what I wanted to stress was the dignity of even this woman who has tears and whose tears drop into the dal that she cooks. There's a dignity about it, and women will have dignity.
Do you feel Indian tradition has enough role models of strong, dominant, forward-looking women who can take their families and their communities along, or do you think we lack in role models?
We have enough role models, but I think each family, each woman, everyone has to, move ahead in their own way. You can't always follow your role model because your circumstances may be different. So in our own ways, we move forward.
Finally, this is a book about transitions, about India changing, the world changing, how we see ourselves changing. And I think we have time for just one little selection now, which is about passers-by watching things change. The last one, please.
Can we move ahead, please? Anyway, yeah. Okay, so this one, is called Passers-by. It's a bit sentimental, it's emotional. We all have people that we leave behind, we move on, whether it's in this life or whether it's in another country or in our own cities. And this journey of life, as the books, the title suggests, is all about scattered rays. There are, in some points in your life, there may be very bright, scattered, very bright rays. You move ahead and then there's a mist. You move ahead, there's a dark spot. And you move ahead again, the rays come again. So it's all about scattered rays and about how the joys and the sorrows of life are there, whatever happens. And so this Passers-by is about a lot of friends that I've left behind. Ships that sail in the night, waves that shine like silver curves, melting into the earth's bosom, the journey with people we meet, moments, hours spent in common spaces, the laughter, the sharing of life's stories, days, weeks, months. When a companion moves on, setting off into the wild, wide ocean, ship tossing on the endless waves, the passerby leaves those behind, moving on into a predestined life. Companions bid each other farewell. The embraces grow sentimental. The hands that hold our friends, enmeshed fingers unwilling to let go. And in the twilight fading, we part ways and move on as ships that sail in the night.
Thank you. Now we have time for one or two questions, if there are any. Yes, the young man over there at the back.
Good afternoon, ma'am. And I really, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
I really congratulate you for the book launch. And I just have one question that since beginning I have been sort of interested into literature, but not much into fiction. And as you were explaining everything related to the different experiences that you had in different countries and with Yamuna as well and things like that. So what do you say? I mean, how does it affect a writer's intellect? I mean, is it even important to go to, experience them by theirs, like you yourself have experienced it? Or is it something like, we can just sit and write? Because I've been reading about a lot. A few days back, I bought a book of Salman Rushdie's biography, in which
I think you've got the question. No? You've got the question.
Yeah.
Do you need to travel to undergo the range of experiences which you have felt?
I don't think you need to travel. It would be great if you can, but I think it's the mind's eye. It's the eye that sees, It's not what... you can read a lot. You have access these days to all kinds of things like, you have things on the internet, you have YouTube, you have Google, and you have your imagination. So, you don't need to keep traveling all the time. It just has to be an awakening within yourself and a challenge to yourself. Excite yourself and start writing.
Ma'am, I'm really sorry to interrupt you. It's just that, okay. Can I continue?
I think we are out of time, but Mrs. Poonam Surie will be here to sign the books you buy or to talk about the poems that she's written. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was